So I'm going to be talking to you about this audit tool that we've created in collaboration with ENT-UK, BRS and Integrate. So the point of the question is we're looking at the way that we manage adult inpatient epistaxis from an ENT perspective. And we've got guidelines that we've developed from the consensus meetings, and so the questions that we've got here are very specifically linked to what we've developed from that consensus. So how do we collect this data? So we've designed a tool using the RedCap server, the RedCap service, and the way that works is it gives you secure encryption at point of access. So when you guys log into it, it means that any information you send is encrypted straight away. Information can only go one way, and it goes straight to the UCL secure server, which means that once you press submit, you can't get anything back. Okay, it's all one way. And once it gets into the secure server, it's behind a double wall, which means that basically no one can access it. In that server, at the moment, we have extremely patient-sensitive information. We have HES databases, we've got GP databases, and it's all patient level, so it gives you an idea of how secure that database has to be able to house this kind of information. So all the data is completely safe. And in the future, should anybody want access to it, it'd have to be through an application process. So no one's going to steal the data, no one's going to play around with it without a full application. So we ran an audit on 5 sites with this tool to begin with, and we're publishing work from that to begin with, but at the moment, I just want to give you a few points that we learned and that we've adapted our tool in line with. So the first thing I want you guys to do when you're back at your sites is to really try this, because try the tool before the study starts, because one of the pilot's site leads, he had a problem where he couldn't get into it. And then he managed to get into it, but then he couldn't submit, and that's because the firewall within the hospital was restricting him. So not only do I need you to go and test it to make sure you can get onto the website, I need you to press submit to make sure that information is being sent. Okay, if it stops you from sending, then I need to know straight away. All right, so that's a really important piece of information. It was only one of those 5 sites, and we told you guys about this up to now, but just make sure you do the submit button. Another problem we had during the audit, the pilot, was the audit key. So each patient is anonymized at source. So you guys are anonymizing them as you see them, and it's sequentially ordered. Now, if you don't have that piece of paper with you, then it's quite easy to think, right, well, I was probably on number 7 on the last patient, I'm probably on patient 8. And what happens is occasionally that duplicates a patient. So if you've entered 2 patients by number 8, it becomes very difficult when I'm trying to separate out the patients. In addition, at the end of the study, at the end of the audit, 30 days later, we're going to give you back all of the patient numbers, the auditor IDs, and ask you to then go and look at what's happened to them in the 30 days intervening. And it'll be very difficult for you to find out what's going on if you haven't put the hospital numbers next to the audit IDs. So it'd be really useful if you keep that with you and keep really tight control over it. A third problem we had was this is, as we've said before, this is an audit not of how we take notes, but of how we manage our patients. And there are some questions in here that may not be recorded on a routine busy ward round. But if you know beforehand, this is the kind of stuff that we're looking for during the audit, it's very easy for you to be thinking about and telling your team about, so it is recorded. It's useless to us to come back at the end and say, well, none of this stuff was recorded and we don't know whether it happened or not. We want to know about how we manage it. So I'm going to go through the tool, we're going to go through the questions, and it'd be a really good idea to think about how you're going to get that information as you're seeing these patients. And to make sure you're getting that information, it'd be good to submit it daily, otherwise you will forget some of this information. Okay, so let's see if this works. If I can go from this. Okay, so actually the first thing, because Rich has used this once before, the first thing that would happen is you'll get a pop-up box that says, are you willing to share your location? Can you please click yes? Okay, that just lets me know where you're filling this in from, and it's a second check against the hospital that you're filling this in against. So it's really useful for me. Okay, the next thing is that these are all the hospitals, these are all of your hospitals, and you just start typing in the name, so I'll put National, and it comes up. And then, like I said, we want a very specific and very accurate audit patient number, so we'll say this is the 5th patient, and this just tells you where we are. This is just a geopositional location. Then we're looking at the patient demographics. We're looking at where this patient was referred to ENT from. So we want to know, did they come to you via A&E, were they referred as an inpatient from another ward, another service, or directly from the GP? So you can click any one of those. Now, on most of these, there's very few that are you must provide them. We've done that deliberately to give you a bit of flexibility, but it's important that you don't abuse that and just go through the whole thing without filling anything in and just submit at the end. Makes it kind of useless. The next question is really about the time that they were admitted to the hospital, which may be very different to the time that you saw them at your ENT service. So we want to figure out how much time they've been in hospital from the point that they entered and the point they left, how much that is apportioned to ENT, and so on. So this is about when they first came into the hospital service. Yes?
So presumably they're an inpatient referral from haematology, but when you got your referral to ENT, not when they
No. Well, no. We want to know when they came into the hospital at that stage.
Even if it wasn't their ENT, I think probably
It was like
a month.
8 months later.
Yeah.
At that stage, this is another question further down that's going to be asking you at what stage was this person brought to ENT's attention. And then simple things like age and sex.
But that's not what it says. It says that at date and time of hospital presentation for current episode of epistaxis, they are on an orthopedic ward and has been started on Plexi, been on orthopedics for 2 weeks, and now they get nurse bleed. What's the answer to that question?
We want to know when they came into hospital to begin with. So I'll change that to make that more accurate.
Yeah,
So you,
because it's not what it says.
yeah. There's a question further down that says specifically about what happens to when they come to your ENT service. Okay? And then simple demographics, age and sex. We don't have date of birth because of course we can't have patient identifiable information at that stage. Has the patient had, so the next questions are about epistaxis that relate specifically to ENT management as an inpatient. So had they previously been managed by ENT? Yes or no? Ever? That's an ever question. So again, that's something that you're thinking about when you're seeing these patients that may not always be documented. And if the answer is yes, how many times in the last year have they made contact with the inpatient, with the ENT service? Yes?
You use 0 up there, because it may have been...
No. If you put no, it closes. It's a logic. So if they've not had any ENT...
Yeah, but if you're saying has this patient had previous epistaxis management for an inpatient, yes, but not in the last year.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah. Okay, I mean, if you don't fill it in, it comes out as 0 to me as on my output.
Okay.
So it doesn't make much difference. Were there any epistaxis admission during this? So the next bit, because we can't identify these patients, because we don't have NHS numbers, we don't have hospital numbers, it's difficult for us to keep track of whether this is a readmission during that audit cycle, whether they were seen a week ago, whether they were seen in another hospital. So this is a question specifically about were they admitted previously during this audit window? And if the answer is yes, then it opens up a few more questions. So the question is, what was the date of their attendance? And I think we've agreed on this as the date of admission. Everyone happy with that? Date of admission. I've got to change that bit at the bottom that says date of discharge, but it is the date of admission that we're using on that.
What if they had 2 admissions during that period of time? I'm
No.
just being devil's advocate.
No.
Generally fine.
Yeah, no. So I've only put in stop for 1. On the whole, statistically, we're not going to be changing too much. We're just going to say, right, well, maybe this person has a thing. We're not really going to be pegging them across the whole pathway. Okay, and then the question is, was it at this hospital? Was it within this hospital? And if the answer is no, then it makes us think, well, maybe we should be looking somewhere else, but I can't really attach them anywhere else because I don't have any NHS numbers. Okay, and then the past medical history, we've shortened this down to just 2 very specific ones, which is high blood pressure and bleeding. And if the answer is yes to bleeding, then we put down some common bleeding problems that you can take 1 or all of. And then drug history, but we're looking more specifically at blood thinning medications, so we don't need to know about all of the medications, but the blood thinning ones. So if there are any blood thinners, then of course these blood thinners then come up, and for every one that you click, we'll be asking you more questions as to what you did during this admission for that medication. Did you stop it? Did you change it? Did you replace it? Did you do nothing with it? Did you reverse it? And that's the same for every single one of these. Okay, and then the next thing is really about grading how bad these patients were when they first attended. So one of the questions relates to, yeah, sure.
What if they are on critical anatomy?
You pick both of them.
2 windows, you do
3, 4, 5, as many as you want. During the 24 hours, so this is a question about how bad hemorrhage is, and there is a WHO classification of major hemorrhage. And one of the things is, did they bleed for less than 30 minutes or more than 30 minutes? This may be a slightly moot point, but it'd be nice to know this information just so we can grade them on that scale. And also the date and time of their first observations, should they have had them done. I mean, I can understand that sometimes they go straight to the urgent referral clinic and they may not have them. And then you've got your normal Muse scores in here that you put in quite easily. Blood tests, did they have any when they arrived? And of course, if they do, then you can click out whichever ones you did. We didn't ask you to fill out anything from urea and electrolytes, but if you put full blood count, then we'd be asking what their hemoglobin is, what their platelets are, and then if you look at group and save, we'd be asking you if you cross-matched any units. Coagulation, we'd want to know what their INR was, is that normal for the patient or not? Yes?
Is that just units cross-matched and not used, or only ones transfused to the patient?
No, that's cross-matched.
Just
at all,
cross-matched,
just
even if
cross-matched at all.
even if
Yeah,
it's left
exactly.
in the fridge, okay.
Yeah.
And this is including the ED's management, so if they've crossed
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, that brings up a really good point, which is that lots of this stuff at the moment may have happened before you've seen this patient, and it's really difficult to record it. But if you're thinking about it and loading it up prospectively and let the clinical teams know, then it may be more easy to capture this information. Okay, so date and time of first ENT review. I can't get rid of this now button, unfortunately. It is quite useful if you're filling it in prospectively. The problem is that if you leave it logged on for too long, it does log you out and you lose all the information, so don't leave them turned on. So then from the ENT point of view, what was the grade of the doctor who saw them? Was any treatment required to achieve hemostasis during that ENT review? So the answer could be no, because hemostasis had already been achieved. A&E had already done something and they'd stopped all the bleeding. And then you're going to come across these questions which are a recurring theme. And the idea is that it's not to lead you, but to get you to answer specifically. You can pick more than one. So what was the treatments that were installed in that first attempt by ENT? So we're looking for anything from maintaining current pack status, if they had packs in, they may not have any packs in, adding further packs, changing packs, inserting new packs, removing packs, nasal cautery, vasoconstrictors, and you can pick as many of these as you want, but this is during that first ENT period that you're seeing these patients. And if you do add questions, then it does add further questions. So for example, if you added a further pack, we want to know which pack was entered, or which pack did you put in, and so on and so forth. And then at that stage, the patient can be discharged. You could have solved everything, you could have taken the pack out, you could have cauterized them, you could send them home. And following the first treatment, was the patient discharged? Yes, and then that's it. That's that form completed. If on the other hand, the patient wasn't and you decided to keep them in for whatever reason, then you've got to have a second ENT management episode. And then again, the second time, what was done, the questions are exactly the same, they expand out to more questions. So, for example, let me expand another one this time. So, let's do surgery. So, the second time you saw them, you ended up doing some surgery. So what surgery did you do? You can pick one or more of these, the date of the surgery, the grade of the principal surgeon, was the patient packed post-op, was hemostasis achieved from the operation, and then again back to, are you now discharging this patient or are you carrying on with the treatment? So third, fourth, and so on. So let's go. The next thing is, what was the time and date that hemostasis was finally achieved? And then the date of discharge from ENT. Now that might be exactly the same time. You may say that they're exactly the same, but for the few patients who you end up cauterizing and solving their problem, but then there's medical reasons or there's social reasons why they've ended up staying under ENT for that period of time, it's useful for us to know how long they ended up staying, just so we can figure out their exact time of stay.
Say they stay for a period of observation, would you say that the hemostasis was achieved and then, for example, the 6th day, would you put them both at the same time for discharge?
Well, ideally, it would be nice to say that I know it's not going to be recorded, but ideally what we'd like is to say, well, at 9 o'clock in the morning we did the ward round, we cauterized the patient, hemostasis was achieved, and then they were discharged at 1 o'clock. Realistically, the chance of you having that information available when they actually left the ward it's going to be slim. I can appreciate that. Those two will be the same. What we're really looking for is if you cauterize the patient at 9 o'clock in the morning and then later on that night they were discharged the next day because of some social reasons or hospital-based reasons. And then there's some supplementary questions, and those questions really relate to what other ancillary treatments were used? So did you seek hematology advice? And if the answer is yes, what was the advice? So it's a free text box there. What was the advice that you sought? What did they say? Other questions are about, was intravenous fluid given at any time during this admission? That could be by A&E. So again, you've got to be thinking about that all the way through. Did A&E install any of these treatments? Did they give this? Was that useful to us? And if fluid was given, we're not just asking about crystalloids and colloids, but that's the stage where we're asking about blood. So that's the question that relates to the blood. So how much was given of each of these? So every one you take, it says how much was given, how many units, how many litres of it. And then there's a question, because it was part of national guidelines, was a transfusion recorded in the patient's notes, and that is part of our national guidelines. So it'd be nice to know that. That's the one question that is about note taking. Were any of the treatments given during this? And so these are the two that we put in that we thought were pertinent, that we have some evidence for, which is antihypertensives and tranexamic acid. And then if tranexamic acid was given, how was it given? Was it given intravenously, PO, topically? And if antihypertensives were given, how were they given? Asymptomatic, which ones were given? And you can pick as many of these as you want. And then finally, which medications did you send this patient home on? Herceptin, Bactroban, antihypertensives. It's different if they were already on antihypertensives and you send them home on exactly the same dose, then it's irrelevant. But if they are on new or altered dose of antihypertensives, I will need to tick that box. That would be great. And then the final thing is about what was the exam like when you saw them? Was an exam performed? What instruments were used? And that's all we need to know about that. And then finally, about any complications that occurred to this patient during this presentation. And then finally submit. And because I didn't